silence to me is a kind of noise. That the more you focus on so-called emptiness or void, the more you find within it, the more information you perceive. You could argue that sound doesn't actually exist. It's always in a state of emerging or decaying. It's never actually there. Hundreds of years ago, sound was described as one of the dark senses and was regarded as inferior. Leonardo da Vinci thought it was inferior. I've been a writer and a curator and a musician and a composer, and I don't think of myself as a sound artist. You know, my ambition when I was very young, even before I was a teenager, was to be a rock and roll star. But one thing I do remember from my childhood was being very frightened of sound. One of the characteristics of sound is that we can hear it and we interpret it, even though we don't necessarily see its source. So we have good reason to distrust sound. And we have some good reason for thinking that the world of things is reliable. We can design with sound in the same way that we design with colour, or we design with line, or we design with 3 dimensions, or whatever. It basically comes down to the way you can work with sound within the digital domain, and maybe in a sense you are more of a designer than you are a composer in the traditional sense. Yeah. Also, of course, you've got the very clear difference of either working within the space of the computer, which is a kind of non-space, or working in the air of rooms. The fact that you can generate vast universes of sound, but it has no place in which it exists. That's a very different way of working than say, playing a violin, where you're just, stroking a bow across a string. I could sit with a pair of cymbals and play for hours, with very fine differences of tonality and the air between the cymbals, and just the way I can shift that timbre, and all I'm doing is moving my hands and listening and making fine adjustments that actually I don't know how they're being controlled. But to do that in the digital domain would involve a huge amount of number crunching. I think we're just at the beginning of trying to understand the differences between working in the digital domain and working with analog. Our idea of music has expanded dramatically to include ambient sound and what an audience might consider non-musical sounds. This group I run called Unknown Devices, the Laptop Orchestra, when it was started, a lot of people bought laptop computers, and some of those people had no experience of making music. They didn't play an instrument. So the laptop was their first instrument. What have you got?
Just sort of jangly things.
Jangly things. Okay.
Things.
You could go over there. When I started directing these improvisation sessions at London College of Communication, there were no preconceptions, there were no standards set up for what you had to be capable of doing or what you had to bring. And so it was as much a surprise to me as it was to them when they all turned up with their various devices. That's why I called the group Unknown Devices, because you never knew what people were going to bring. You try and find a common language, don't you? You try and find a place where, I think it's what Alistair said, you know, you find a place. That's enough for it. A place where you can kind of be together. But then also it's nice to push it sometimes. You know, and go too far and push people into areas that maybe they don't want to go. And then just cut out. Digital technology reconstitutes sound as numbers. And gosh.
Should we
Just a break for a second.